All right, hello and welcome to the Turner Podcasting System on indiequebec.com. This podcast will take you back to the glory days of WCW. For better or for worse, we will review a new show every episode. I'm the Prez. I'm just a local guy from the Quebec wrestling scene, here to talk about one of my favorite feds of all time, one of the greatest eras, WCW, Turner Broadcasting. And let me introduce you to my co host. He's one of the biggest WCW fans that I know. I consider him an expert on WCW. So, who better to co host this podcast with me? None other than the Stinger.
Hey, what's up, Quebec? What's up, wrestling fans? Mr. Perez, how are you?
Doing great, man. Before the show, I was getting into the 2000s era spirit, watching a bit of Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place with Ryan Reynolds.
Oh man,
And
classic 2000s.
I must say, it was a great era. So, fans at home, today we're going to be reviewing the infamous pay per view, New Blood Rising. Me and the Stinger are very familiar with this era, WCW in the 2000s. It was towards the end of WCW.
It was definitely towards the end. It was April 10th, 2000 episode of Nitro was the reboot when Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff came out, had their announcement, and ended up basically stripping everyone from their title. So that was
Yeah,
exciting to see in 2000. Knowing that they had a bunch of fresh talents, but they still had what we call the Millionaires Club, which included Ric Flair, Diamond Dallas Page, Kevin Nash, Lex Luger, all the home run hitters.
yeah. All the big money players they had quite the roster, and they just kept adding. And so yeah, it was this pay per view, August 13th, 2000. So it's a bit after that reboot, and it's called New Blood Rising. But at this point, that storyline had already kind of slowed down. The New Blood was already kind of like not a faction anymore.
Absolutely. It's funny because the New Blood Billionaire Club feud and storyline did begin literally in April, May. And then as we hit Road Wild, which was the original August
Yeah.
pay-per-view, became New Blood Rising. So there, you had a gap of a couple of months, whereas, they actually did most of the storylines in the few months before. And then once we hit New Blood Rising, it was quite a how can I say? It was a refreshing, random surprise.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely started to go into a different direction. I think um, by this time Eric Bischoff had um, less power in the company. Like when him and Russo restarted everything with the New Blood storyline, Bischoff was there, but I think by this time it's all Russo. And I think by the booking of this show, we could tell very much that Vince
It was
Russo's
Russo,
fingerprints. Yeah, they're all over it.
that New York badass for sure. Give you a quick example before we won't get into details. Our beautiful on the pole matches, stipulations, classic Russo.
Yeah, definitely.
Wait, pause, Johnny. If this, do we use the stipulation a bit before the match, or we could always do it in the beginning where we throw it out?
Yeah. Well, we could start talking about all of it now. We'll talk about the card as we go through it, and I mean, there's no spoiler alerts, right? Anyone who wants to watch this, you can watch it on the WWE Network, or maybe you still have it on VHS.
VHS. I do somewhere in the box
I
in
think,
the garage.
yeah, I think this event, yeah, it was still in the VHS era. I'm pretty sure
Oh,
all of WCW was in the VHS era.
I was about to transition on DVD. I don't think any events actually made it out on DVD we were literally about to transition. So you are
Yeah,
right, John. Everything was on solid VHS.
yeah. So this event took place from Vancouver, British Columbia, beautiful Canadian city in the Pacific. It was at the Pacific Coliseum. There was only 6,614 people in attendance, allegedly. That's a decent crowd, but it's not huge. It's not 20,000. And the tagline was "Our time is now." Now, Vancouver, that was not a traditional WCW territory at all. This was definitely their first show from Vancouver. What do you think about the fans here compared to Southern WCW fans, Stinger?
Well, good old WCW. So we were used to seeing things like Tulsa, Atlanta, North Carolina. So it's kind of refreshing to see a nice crowd in Vancouver. It was the first event that was held on Vancouver soil. Whereas we were always used to seeing Canadian events where in Toronto,
Yeah,
as you know, with WrestleMania. Also, there was a couple of Raws that were held in Montreal and are
yeah, right here
famous
in Montreal.
right here in Montreal. Super controversial, 1997. You all know what I'm talking about. Good old HBK. But Vancouver was refreshing. To be honest, when I looked at the crowd, I saw one crowd. A member, he was wearing a Atlanta Thrashers
Yeah, I
jersey,
actually
which was
recognize the same
you
guy.
do. So it was funny to see that there was a mix of, all types of fans in there, obviously from Vancouver, but it was just so 2000.
Yeah, the
Honestly,
crowd
it
with that
brought me back.
Atlanta Thrashers jersey is so
Absolutely,
year 2000.
absolute super year 2000. And if you saw the opening segment, the fans, the one that was flexing, so it was super nostalgic to the 2000, and it was nice to see in Vancouver. Honestly, Vancouver is one of the big cities in Canada, and for WCW to have at least graced their presence there before going obsolete was actually I liked it, to be
Yeah, it's
honest.
very cool. Even WWE doesn't make it out to Vancouver that often.
No, and I'm surprised WWE hits more like Montreal, as you know, Toronto, some big cities. I think I've seen them shoot a show once, or it was a house show. And it wasn't a shot show in Alberta, but not in
Yeah,
Vancouver.
yeah, they don't usually make it out that far.
And it's surprising they have a lot of teams, Vancouver, well, especially in the National Hockey League. So they do have the arena for a mega show. But
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, this was definitely 2000s, and again, don't forget it was one of the last pay-per-views that WCW graced, and I
yeah,
think in Canada.
yeah, probably was. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there was Mayhem that was in '99
Yeah, that
in
was in
Toronto,
Toronto. That was Toronto, exactly. So that
and
was the
then
last major pay-per-view,
in
if I
Canada.
recall, before exactly in Canada before New Blood Rising. So
Yeah, and like in like the 1995 and before era of WCW, there was no chance that like they were ever coming to do a show in Canada at that time. It was purely South Carolina, Alabama,
absolutely,
Oklahoma.
absolutely. And as you're an expert to this, which region, which wrestling promotion did run and dominate
Vancouver.
those regions? Yeah,
There was
none.
a promotion called All Star Wrestling,
All Star
which
Wrestling.
was um, it was basically the Western promotion. Um, I know also that Stampede Wrestling had some affiliations and was seen in British Columbia as well.
Right, because they would
But
go from
it was also its own territory at one time.
right, right,
Vancouver. I know that Raven wrestled there, so it was a territory that went on actually quite late, almost into the '90s. But it
right,
wasn't a big money territory.
right.
The guys never made money like the guys wrestling in Mid Atlantic or the guys wrestling in
Exactly.
WWF.
The high time regions.
Yeah, exactly. So the opening montage is very 2000s. You see a lot of Goldberg and Nash. There's a match here on the card that they're building up to Goldberg versus Kevin Nash versus Scott Steiner, which is your semi main event. And yeah, I just love those very 2000s montages.
They were super, super 2000. And if you live in Quebec specifically, you remember seeing the publicity for it and the commercials on the pay-per-view channel and good old Indigo.
Yeah, Indigo, exactly.
Indigo. I used to see that very, very basically Indigo, and demontage is the most 2000s thing, definitely when it comes to WCW. But yeah, famous for Nash, Goldberg. We even saw I think a bit of Steiner, Booker T, and our boy Jeff Jarrett, Double J.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a double main event with that triple threat and Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett for the title. That is the main event. These guys feuded a lot. At the time, it was quite a good feud.
Back and forth. Started, if I was correct, started at Bash at the Beach 2000.
Yeah.
Which was a good month before.
Very controversial angle with Hulk Hogan. One day we'll get to that show.
We'll get to that show.
Summer. We'll do
absolutely. We've had weeks of discussions on that.
It's got to be. We got to do that one in the summer. It's snowing.
For sure.
It's snowing out right now. We can't talk about Bash.
No Bash at the Beach.
That's right. So, the set of the show was just basically a screen over the entrance, very similar to Raw at the time, and WCW had used this exact set for quite some pay-per-views in '99 and 2000. Not all of them. But this was like kind of their go-to generic pay-per-view set at the time. I always thought it looked like a rip-off of Raw's set. What do you think?
It was definitely a rip-off, except it was just a little less, how can we say, fancy. Yeah. For sure, they did take, and they did use the same format. But it also kind of, if I'm correct, it also looked like Thunder, like some Thunders were kind of like that.
Yeah,
where
like
it was
the
kind
later
of plainish. The later, yes, not the nice shiny blue. That's again another topic, but
also, the first Thunder set is awesome.
It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. Absolutely.
Like the rooftops, it looked like a rooftops. The lighting was really cool. The original concept for Thunder was great.
Classic 1998.
It just kind of got lazy and it became generic. But it's also, I'm pretty sure you're right. They did use that set for Thunder, but the last Thunder set was just a giant screen. Remember?
Yes, I do recall that.
The guys would come out in front. It was
absolutely
like a 60-foot.
Exactly. It looked like they were unpacking the show for some reason. They just had that screen, and people would, all the wrestlers would come. Exactly. So
it would just come from around.
Just like you said, unfinished, kind of like the year 2000 and all the storylines that came with it.
Yeah, indeed. So at the time, following WCW here in Quebec, you would have had to either watch on TSN or RDS at the time.
Yes.
At the time, WWF and WCW were both on the same channel, if believe it or not. Like AEW and WWE would never be on the same channel today. But in Canada, in the year 2000 and before, for quite a bit of time, TSN and RDS carried both WCW and WWF at the same time. And they would show Nitro late after Raw or Tuesday afternoon after school. So often I would watch Nitro Tuesday afternoon after school.
Guys, note in mind, this was before the internet was actually so robust in content. So we had to actually watch quick. Sometimes they had the shows where they would just give us out the results. If you do remember our famous Monsieur Blondin, one of the announcers for RDS. Marc
I've
Blondin.
met the man many times.
Absolutely. That again is another story and another episode. But
Marc we can do a whole episode about Marc Blondin and the old WCW on RDS.
RDS was the place to go. Finish school, you'd come, you'd watch the results. Sometimes they would cut some things out if you remember, because TNT and TBS, when they play episodes, like so Thunder and Nitro, you'd have the full content, but they would cut some things out. But we were still lucky to have both brands on the same channel, and again after school.
This was still the cable era. There simply wasn't enough channels for both to be on a different channel.
Exactly.
It was cable. This was like prime. Well, this was like the end of the cable era, really.
Exactly. And they would categorize it. Oh, so we'd go to the sports channel, which RDS
exactly. It's all
took.
On TSN.
Absolutely.
Now there's about TSN 6, 7, 8. They have like 9 channels now.
Same with Global.
Back in the day, there was TSN and RDS. That was it.
Absolutely. We had Sportsnet, but they never covered anything. Yeah, exactly.
That came out later, a bit
sure.
later. It started off as like just news, and then I think they actually had Heat on Sportsnet.
Absolutely. I think that's why I mentioned it. WWF, good old Heat.
Yeah. So the commentators on this show are 3 really great commentators. Scott Hudson, Tony Schiavone, and Mark Madden. I find them great as a team. They were kind of like the standard WCW commentary team at the end of WCW. What did you think of the commentary team, Stinger?
Absolutely. You had a lineup of seasoned veterans when it came to announcing. So you had Scott Hudson, which, by the way, I'm a huge fan of, was a huge fan of back in the day. Tony Schiavone, classic, absolutely. A&W, AEW, every time I watch him, I just think of WCW, and I'm sure same thing for everyone.
Definitely.
And then you had your funny guy, Mark Madden, who was a great heel commentator. Besides all that, why he got fired, that's another episode again. But
Yep.
I did like
He
that
was so
lineup.
funny. He was like trying to be like a younger Jerry Lawler. He was like he'd say a lot of jokes. He would say a lot of pop culture references. Yeah, overall
Absolutely.
he was hilarious. I thought he was a great commentator. I'm surprised he stopped doing commentary after WCW. The guy definitely, I could see him still doing it.
I went to search him up last night and I saw something about him and MLB. So I think he did one of those shows we used to watch, like on RDS style, where they would give out the results for MLB. If
Yeah,
you
like
search it up, Jay, yeah, like a little,
he's
a
into
little
sports. Yeah,
newscast. Exactly, he's into sports, but exactly. I'm surprised we didn't see him in wrestling because, if you remember, WWA came out
yeah.
at some point after
After
WCW was bought
WCW
out.
closed, yeah,
Exile was purchased by WWE, so they had AWA, and I'm surprised we didn't see him on TNA as well.
yeah.
Uh, so to start out in the early 2000s. Also, I'll give you guys a funny trivia. Madden. So we were sitting in computer class, me and John. This was 2000, guys. Don't. So we were about 13, 14. We were not supposed to be browsing on the net, but John ultimately went on a wrestling site and found that it was a fan that punched Mark Madden in the head in the crowd. You remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we laughed, and our teacher was like, "What are you guys doing?" We're in science class, and we were like, "Hey, we're just looking at the wrestling news." And
Yeah.
so the news came out of Mark Madden getting punched in the head by a crowd. It was just a little trivia I wanted to throw out there just to make it, to show
Context
you guys the 2000s was just a fun era
what
to go
the era
search up
was
everything.
like because
Exactly.
in those days, also, this is another thing. Like we were pretty young when this happened. So even like by the time Nitro would be over, it was probably like our bedtime. Not to sound like we were losers, it was probably anyone listening's bedtime at that age too, right?
It was
So
definitely.
and so, but back in the day, like it was still like dial-up internet. If you woke up in the morning, it wasn't like today where you could just look on your phone and look instantly on the internet. You'd have to go into your computer room, turn on the internet, and then no one could call into the house. No, like you didn't really have time to check the internet at home that much in
Exactly.
the morning like you do today. So like sometimes we would get to school and we didn't know the results yet of the show. So we'd like if we had computer class, it's like we'd be right there on WWF.com or the wrestling news sites looking up, and we'd only find out the results of like a pay per view or Raw, sometimes like at school the next day. Or like maybe I had seen it, or maybe Stinger had actually seen it, and then he would tell me, "Oh, did you see it last night?" I say, "Oh no, I didn't see it." So then he would tell me, "There's a lot of word of mouth in it."
It,
In it.
it was word of mouth because again, yeah, it did take 15 minutes to put up your computer. No one had to call. If someone called, you'd lose your page. So it was always word of mouth, and it was through TV mostly because it is like you said before, perfectly said. It was the cable era. You even had channels you dial on TV to get the results, things like that. So we really
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have a robust internet system with plenty
It
of
was
searches
really
and
all
pages.
cable based.
Yeah, exactly. And most pages were done on Angel Fire, if you remember,
Yeah, yeah. You could like
angelfire.com.
find
Uh,
some cheap websites made that would
exactly.
give you wrestling news.
Exactly. So they
That's
gave
it.
us the wrestling news with plain font and no budget.
Exactly. But that's all we had at the time, and that's what it was.
Definitely.
So yeah, like today, even if you don't watch a pay per view, you could just go on YouTube and find some guy giving you a rundown of the pay per view like 15 minutes after it happened.
Absolutely.
So let's get into the first match here, which is quite a crazy first match. It's a team of a 3 count, accompanied by Tank Abbott taking on the Young Dragons in a 3 versus 3 ladder match, where this is a very Russo stipulation, by the way. Um, Instead of a belt or a number one contender's contract being what you win in the ladder match, the winners of this ladder match got the 3 counts recording contract, which they already have. So I don't see why they would care about having that. And a gold record, which is like just a material possession that's worth what, a couple $100.
$100,
Anyways,
John.
so it's a pretty ridiculous reason to have such a violent match. But here we are. Tank Abbott at this point was not the monster Tank Abbott whatsoever. Tank Abbott here is like dancing around like a damn fool. It's quite hilarious, but like they pretty much bury his character as well. What?
Absolutely.
Yeah, tell me what would you think of the beginning of this match?
It just got worse for him. He came out, he wore a 3 count t-shirt, also with the nipples cut out. So for the love of
Exactly. They
God,
just made a fool of the
it was
guy.
just super foolish. When he first started, Tank Abbott obviously was transitioning out of MMA, which was UFC, and he was one of the top. At that time, at that era, he was one of the top tough guys. So he did
Yeah.
come in with a rep, and he was scary. If I do remember, Goldberg had defeated him a bit before that. It was his return where he beat him in a couple of
Yeah.
minutes at Nitro. So don't forget he bounced, back from that, but into the 3 count. So I mean, to see him dance like that and act like a fluffy guy, which was cool. I mean, it was funny. It was just, they did bury his character. I think they
Yeah.
just wanted to make a goofball out of him. I don't know what they were thinking, but
But you're
I mean, hey, it's Tank Abbott.
yeah. At least he had a spot on the show. But as
Exactly.
you were saying, like when he lost to Goldberg, though, he never really recovered from that.
I mean, exactly. And that's what happens with I mean, a lot of guys did lose to Goldberg and they bounced back, but Tank Abbott, for some odd reason, it just went downhill from
Yeah, it
there. I
just
think
killed
after
his credibility. And
exactly, and they grouped him with 3 count. He could have bounced back and been main eventing more, been an enforcer, etc. But yeah, I don't
yeah,
know
they
why
just
they
threw him right into a comedy storyline. And
exactly. And don't get me wrong, these guys were young, raw, and they had plenty of talent.
oh yeah,
Absolutely. Cruiserweights, they were very good in the ring. But to throw him in with them was definitely the last screw in pretty much his coffin.
yeah, definitely. So at this point, as you're alluding to, so these guys were all cruiserweights. At this point, WCW had revamped their cruiserweight division. All these guys were a part of that revamp. Um, at this point, we didn't have the 98 cruiserweights like Damien, Ciclope. They had gone away a bit from the Mexicans and they went and got more like homegrown talent. What do you think
Exactly.
of that transition?
It actually, honestly, wanted to keep that WCW tradition of cruiserweight. So yeah, we did have Cyclone, we did have Lismark, we had all those fancy, the good classic cruiserweights. But the homegrown talent, honestly, the local scene, I did like. So you saw guys like Shane Helms emerge, Shannon Moore, also Evan Courageous. I like Evan Courageous, just the Medusa thing and um, uh,
Yeah, he's
the
probably my least
cruiserweight.
favorite of the
Yeah,
three.
exactly. It was still good talent, definitely, but it was just that awkward Oklahoma. That's anyways another episode. But they were good talent, but they were trying to keep on the legacy. They, I think, didn't want to always put on the traditional. They wanted to change. Also, we're transitioning into the 2000s, so things were hip. As you see their style, they had the baggy pants and the pop thing going on. So this was very early
It's
2000s,
more
but
relatable than like
exactly than the
the
luchas.
Mexican luchadors. They're cool, but they're not relatable, and
No, they're not. They're
they're not really
traditional.
on the mic, so it's kind of limiting,
Exactly.
despite how good they were in the ring.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was a good idea for them to go local because you saw a lot of stars emerge.
Yeah.
Shane Helms, made it all the way to WWF after as
Yeah,
the
he's pretty much a
Hurricane, and
legend at this point.
absolutely, and
Shannon Moore as well, as you said.
Shannon Moore too. They were great talent. Evan as well.
Yeah.
Jamie Noble also was actually great talent. So I was happy to see WCW kept and revamped, and they still polished, even though the whole theme was the billionaire clubs versus the new blood. They always had time and screen time for the cruiserweights, which
Yeah,
was awesome.
that's true. And that was great. That's something WWF at the time wasn't doing. The WWF cruiserweight division at the time was so boring.
Taka Michinoku and other, like, they had good talent, but
SA
it was not
Rios,
Essa Rios and
but
Lita.
they'd
That's
only
where
have
Lita.
like they'd have like two guys, three guys, and they'd always be fighting each
Exactly.
other. And
Exactly. It was the same old classic matchups in between these guys, but WCW had a robust, they did have a big roster for cruiserweight. And
one
like you said,
one reason I think that they did this ladder match as well, because you didn't see a lot of ladder matches in WCW, but
no,
this was right, not right after, but like it's on the heels of the TLC and the ladder matches between Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys in WWF. So I think that they were trying to get some of that hype that those matches got from from those guys, because like before those ladder matches, the Hardy Boys were literally nobodies. That really put them on the map. And I think that WCW saw that and they're like, let's get our high flyers in a ladder match too here.
absolutely, absolutely. It was the extreme team extreme vibe that they
Yeah.
they they tried to do. Yes, exactly. Because don't forget, WWF at that time was actually dominating.
Oh yeah.
They had all the main eventers. They had all the big pay-per-views. They had the huge sold out arenas. It was impossible back in the day to get a ticket to one of those events.
Oh yeah. Like
It
this
was
WCW pay-per-view had 6,000 people.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we look up the comparing pay-per-view of WWF, it's 20,000 for sure.
Absolutely, they were mega.
They were
So
killing
WWF,
WCW at this time. We
absolutely,
definitely have to make that point clear.
and also
WWE or WWF was killing WCW at the time of this pay-per-view.
absolutely suffocating. But also, what's funny is when I was watching this in 2000, I did not know that it was months away
From
from
the
going
end.
defunct. Yeah, so we
Yeah,
still
none of us
we
knew.
no, we knew it was not as good as WWF because you had The Rock, Kane, Triple H. We were, I think, waiting still for Austin to come back. I think it was the Rikishi. I think that was a little later, but we were still waiting for Austin. So you still had a lot of good energy from WWF.
It
Yet
was like the middle of
WCW,
the Attitude Era. They were
it
getting
was the
crazy good
middle.
ratings.
It was getting the pro. They had Kurt Angle. I think Taz. They had the big roster, the good roster. All the main eventers. The mid carders as well. They dominated in mid card. So that's one point that WWF actually succeeded, is with the mid card at that time. But WCW, it was either the mid card was absolutely terrible. It was just
It was all
considered, to
over the
be
place.
honest, it was random, and so yeah, you're right. It was definitely getting butchered at that time by
Yeah,
WWF.
definitely. So 3 count ended up pulling out the win here. So they keep their contracts. So yeah, it was just basically a reason to have a ladder match. It turned out cool. I thought it was quite a good way to start the show, actually. I must say.
Absolutely. And disco was given a lot of disco. This is the era where disco started getting more and more
Screen time.
important. Screen time is
Yeah,
more
that's
important.
right. Right after this match, we have Disco and the rest of the Filthy Animals. They have an interview with the cat, and the cat gives them an opportunity to get a tag title shot if they somehow help him out. They come up with some
Exactly.
kind of scheme, which
Also,
leads us to our next match. The cat himself, he was the commissioner at the time. He's going to wrestle, taking on the legendary Great Muta. What did you think about this match, Stinger?
always a pleasure to see the great Muda, his old school 1980s team. It was a treat, but again, it was quite random. I realized it was just a random matchup. I know he was commish, and he was getting a lot of screen time, the cat. But I found that it was
Kind of a weird matchup.
it
I
was
agree.
awkward. It was awkward, yeah. And to be honest, between me and you, all the real wrestling fans, Great Muta is an amazing wrestler. He's a classic. Ernest Miller, I like the karate thing, but personally, I would say not too much. He was great on the mic, and he was funny, but it was just odd to see Ernest Cat Miller versus the Great Muta.
Yeah, like they were both martial artists, but I never seen like two martial artists like have some crazy martial arts wrestling match. It never really works like that.
No, definitely.
I don't know why, but yeah, it didn't. Yeah, it was kind of an awkward match. It wasn't that great of a match, but Muda is always legit, a legit star.
Absolutely
Um,
legit.
so Tigress, who is ended up being Queen Charmel, she ends up hitting Muda in the head with a chair off the top rope. Like, what a what a violent what a violent way to interfere. But she didn't even do it properly, so it looked kind of weird. But
Botched.
yeah, it was pretty botched overall. But the match didn't end there. Actually, the cat actually pulled off the win with his spin kick. So, anyways, that was just a 2000s WCW match. I mean, it could have been a Nitro match. Nothing that special here, but
Definitely lackluster, we'll just say.
yeah, exactly. But so next, we get Buff Bagwell looking backstage, and we're going to go into the most well remembered match of this pay per view by fans. The most well remembered match of this pay per view by me, for sure. It's technically Judy Bagwell on a pole match, but it ends up being Judy Bagwell on a forklift match.
That old battle axe.
Yeah, exactly. Canyon comes out and gives this really heel promo. And Canyon has blonde hair, which makes him even more heel.
A big heel.
Yeah, blonde hair is just dyed blonde like that is very heel, especially at that time.
Absolutely. He's trying to rip off Diamond Dallas Page,
Yeah,
positively Canyon, as you remember that gimmick. To be honest, Canyon was a great performer, rest in peace. He was great
definitely.
he was superb on the mic. He was actually underrated. He was a great heel. Just the way he used to yell at the crowd, he was definitely legit as a heel.
Oh, he could get the crowd
And
against him. Like
oh
he
yeah,
was a great heel.
especially when you're in Canada and you insult Canada, absolutely, you won't win points there. So classic heel. Great wrestler as well. I love the way, as you know, 2000, you were starting to get, more like complex storylines. So like he was trying to be DDP, getting in his skin. He got personal with Kimberly. So it was just fun.
It was like a deep storyline.
It was a deep story, like especially that they were friends. So we love our boy Mortis. Again, great talent, and Canyon versus Buff Bagwell. I like Buff Bagwell, to be honest, but just created so much antics that they never actually really pushed him. Like this is, if I remember, they were trying to push him as a face here, as a mid
Yeah,
carder to possibly go to
to be a
main
main eventer
eventing.
kind of thing.
Exactly. So you have to always do that gig for the mid, mid carding, and then go to the main
Yeah, to
event.
build
But
yourself up.
build yourself up. But as you know, Buff Bagwell, this was a funny trivial fact that you gave me. What would his mother help him with, John?
And okay, well, this show, like I would almost guarantee that this happened on this show because his mom for sure was at the show.
He was looking
Apparently,
for her, by the way, before during the segment. He was looking for his mom.
yeah, exactly. For what reason? So apparently, Buff Bagwell would have his mom like come with him to all his wrestling shows, and she would help him shave all his body hair, including his nutsack, at the arena. Like his mom was
Valet, mom,
like a
his nurse,
pageant mom,
probably
taking
his
like her
pageant
little
mom,
kid to a beauty pageant.
the equivalent of a coach dad bringing his son
Exactly.
to hockey games and football practices,
Yeah, exactly. So Judy Bagwell becomes the stipulation here because Canyon wants to make her his Kimberly.
That's totally.
It's
I
just
realized
wrong on so many
absolutely
levels.
wrong. Just 2000 was the year where they're like, hey, you know what? Let's go all out. As if you remember, 97 all the way in 99, they still had attitude, but man, from 99 to 2000, they cranked up
Yeah, there
the
was like no
weird,
filter.
controversial. There was no filter because I think the government had the regulations. You were allowed now to use mature themes, so everything changed. So you saw all that from 99 to 2000, but more from 2000 to 2001. That's
Yeah,
where
definitely.
totally
And then
no
in
filter,
2001, after 9/11, stuff got toned down. But there was
super toned
really
down.
that time. And then like a bit after it got toned back up and toned back down. But you're right. This was really when there was no filter. There was like, you would tune on, especially because it was on pay-per-view. You would think anything could happen when you'd be watching a wrestling pay-per-view in the year 2000.
Absolutely. Anything would go and anything would happen. And as a stipulation, as is Kimberly, that is disgusting. Yet, pretty interesting match to be honest. I think also it was I've seen it make its appearance on, as you guys know, big shout out to
Yeah, the classic
WrestleCrap.com,
wrestle crap.
classic WrestleCrap. Tons of videos on YouTube
Oh
pertaining
yeah,
to
this
this
clip is
match.
very easy to find. If you fans
Absolutely
haven't
easy to
seen
find.
this Cutie Bagwell on a forklift match, you can easily find at least clips of it on YouTube for sure.
Also, Canyon found that a forklift could carry her and her big derriere, as you say here in Quebec, because she was just a big old battle axe.
Yeah, because originally she was supposed to be on a pole, but they put her on a forklift. It's crazy. So if the match already isn't crazy enough, David Arquette shows up out of nowhere and he tries to help Kenyon win, but he ends up messing up and Buff wins. And then Kenyon cutters David Arquette after. And I think that was the last appearance of David Arquette in WCW.
Thank God, because David Arquette was. I don't even have the words to say. At that time, if you remember, Scream 3 just came out. Okay,
I
no one
remember
liked
at the
Dewey.
time you were a
Yes,
big fan of the
I was
Scream
a
franchise.
huge Scream fan, even to the point where I wore. Actually, someone took my mask and you got it back from me. They took it from me, and you're like, "Hey, come back!" And I think you like had put them in half a DDT, like a standing inverted DDT, and so I got it back. Anyways, long story short,
Back in the
John
day.
was my boy back in the day, and I did love Scream. I just didn't want to see Dewey win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at that time, a few months before New Blood Rising. That was the last thing I saw. By the way, I read an article not too long ago where Courtney Cox stated that their marriage was ruined because of that stint. She didn't
Oh
say
my
in
god.
details how, because I die to know what
Yeah,
caused it,
really?
but she said it did not help their wedding. So we had douchebag David Arquette come in, and I was actually happy when Canyon gave him a Canya cutter.
Do you remember
Um,
at the time when he was married to Courtney Cox, everyone was like making fun of him because his wife made so much more money than him? And how much
absolute.
his wife was so much of a bigger star than he was?
I think Mark Madden said something like that when he
Oh yeah.
first came out. He said Courtney Cox is busy shooting movies while David Arquette, well, he kind of insulted the event. He basically low key said, while this guy's here in this
And this
shabby
like,
pay per view
yeah,
in a venue of 6,000 people, allegedly.
yeah, indeed. So then after the match, we're done with that epic match. We see from the outside of the arena, Lance Storm shows up in a purple limousine. You remember in this era, every wrestling show, you would see a limousine pop up, like show up, and they'd be like, "Who's in the limousine?"
And
Every show, it was a trope. It was like overdone in this
a
era.
trope, you said, yes, whenever they had a mystery guest coming in or a mystery tag partner or a mystery opponent, chances are they were always coming out of a limousine.
Yeah, you'd see a
To
limo pull into like the loading dock of the arena,
always.
and like often they would even do it like the guy would show up you would see a limo show up before the commercial break, and then you would want to know who it was, and you'd hear JR like, "Oh my God, is that Vince McMahon?" And
Oh my
then
God.
after the commercial break, then you would see the guy come out of the limo. Like, it was almost like part of wrestling at this time.
It was
That
definitely.
done.
It was so I think it's because at that time limousines were huge, it was huge, fancy, and it was super luxurious, right? So every time
It
they'd
was something they could
announce,
like. It looked baller to have it.
it was actually, he did always pull. You made a good point at a dock or like the back
Like
opening
pulling
of the
inside to
arena.
the arena kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly, and there was always I think fights, even wrestlers
Yeah,
would
the guy
fight
would come out
on
of
top of
the
them.
limo, and then the other guy would be there.
Exactly. I forgot who got pile driven on the roof of a limo, but a limo was always there. So if you were in 2000 and there was a mystery guest or a mystery opponent or a partner, chances are, like John said, came out of a limo, and they would do that classic, "By God, who is it?" and then get you to stress for 3 minutes while the commercials were playing. Cut back again to a brief shot of the limo, and then later on you would find out that it was Animal. I'm joking. I'm actually
Yeah,
making
that.
a reference to another pay-per-view, but it was definitely, and this was in WCW and WWF.
Yeah, both definitely used limos all the time for sure. So the next matchup is fatal four-way tag match for the tag titles with four special refs, which are the Filthy Animals. Disco Inferno is going to be the one reffing the match in the ring. Conan's on commentary, quite hilarious on commentary. The,
Absolutely hilarious.
the four teams are Corporal Cajun and General Rection versus Jindrak and O'Hare versus Stasiak and Palumbo versus Chronic. What was your impression of this match?
Bro, Vancouver was definitely down with Chronic.
Yeah,
That's one thing. Um, what? When I saw them all come out at that time, it was just a huge match, but it was very confusing. I thought it was extremely confusing.
in the one thing that people might not remember or realize, like WCW had a way smaller ring than WWE. So when they would do these like multi-man matches,
Big time. It
they
would
were
look
all
crowded,
like jammed up.
crammed, and crowded.
And there's a
Absolutely.
lot of
There
big
was,
guys in this match too.
yeah. So just Chronic alone was about a quarter of the ring.
That's it, exactly.
So, well, you had also Chuck Palumbo, Sean Stasiak were huge guys, and then you had Sean O'Hare and Mark Jindrak, who were massive guys as well.
The
And
only small guy in the match is Corporal Cajun. He ends up getting
Lash,
beat up like pretty much the whole match.
hey, I love Corporal Cajun. Lash LaRue, I used to
I'm
pick him all the
surprised he never
time.
got a chance in WWE. The guy had
No,
talent.
he definitely had talent, and at least he was in WCW Mayhem, the video game on PS1. Guys, get your
He
copy
actually made
now.
a video game. Was
Absolutely, he made a video game. So definitely, if I was Corporal Cajun, Lash LaRue, I'd sleep well at night because you were in WCW Mayhem.
if you
Which, by
made
the
a
way,
video game, that's pretty good,
that's
especially in
it.
those days.
Absolutely. If you say that you were in Backstage Assault, WCW Backstage Assault, I would just not tell anyone because that game was
Yeah.
absolutely horrendous. But the match, honestly, I mean, I've lost count. These guys were feuding, all these tag teams at some point for the longest time. Came down to New Blood Rising. I don't know how I felt about it. It's always a pleasure to see the big guys go at it. Chronic, the Perfect Event. It was your classic. The only thing entertaining I find, you had good talent. It was more Conan, as you said. Conan was hip at that time, man. He had the lingo and
Conan
he
was amazing on
was
commentary.
hilarious.
Like his commentary almost saves the match.
Absolutely. That
When
actually what saved the match to me, it was Conan,
yeah, he's like the
being
highlight of the
commentator
match.
for sure.
And Disco as ref was funny too.
Disco as ref was funny. Exactly. Another point is they were giving him more and more mic time. So this was kind of his rise, even though they
Yeah.
did push him at some point in the wolf bag and he was running around after the outsiders. But it was good to see good old Disco getting pushed, but probably not good enough to save the
When
product at
Chronic
that
comes
time.
out, Conan on commentary is like, Oh, not these J-Brons again.
The J Abrams again, and the commentators took offense to that. They said, "Well, these J Abrams are the champions, the
Yeah,
huge
exactly.
champions for sure." To be honest, I saw them as kind of millionaires club because you had Wrath in there, and then you had Brian Adams, who was
Yeah, they're
multiple
like, oh,
gimmicks.
they could have been part of the Millionaires Club. They were like,
Exactly,
it was
exactly,
like a reskin. Chronic was a reskin.
exactly. It was like the new era, the new gen of the millionaire club type thing because you had Brian Adams, who
And
came
pot
from.
wasn't legalized at the time, so
Mhm.
they alluded to being potheads, but they
Exactly.
didn't really smoke pot. They were
No,
kind of like the APA, but for weed, not
for
beer.
weed and not beer and poker and cigars. But like I said, Vancouver was definitely down with
Oh
Chronic
yeah,
because they got a pop when they came out.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So
Chronic was over here for sure. They were very much the most popular team in the match. I
oh yeah,
remember at the time I was a big fan of the Filthy Animals. I really liked them.
same
And I
here.
remember thinking Jindrak and O'Hare like were destined to become main
Absolutely.
eventers, both
Yeah,
of them.
because they were high flyers, I think, both of them for their size,
Yeah,
especially Sean O'Hare, rest in peace. He was a great wrestler, to be honest.
yeah, they were
Same with
both
Mark
so
Jindrak.
athletic and they were like 6'5" in super
Abs-
good shape. They looked like
absolutely.
the future wrestlers. Like
Exactly.
it looked like they looked like the perfect wrestlers for the year 2000.
Exactly, and I would say the same thing for the perfect event,
Yeah, you're
because
right. Yeah.
you had
I didn't give
perfect
them
event.
much credit, but you're right. These guys did have
No,
quite a. They were great too. They had a lot of potential. Colombo and
absolutely,
Stasiak.
absolutely. These guys were, I think, mid carding at this point in the tag team scene, and these guys had the vibe of kind of like Lex Luger with Ric Flairish vibes a
Yeah.
bit, the
At
new
one time,
gen.
and like Mr. Perfect, they were trying to rip. One of them was trying to rip off Mr. Perfect, but
Sean Stasiak's team. I thought literally last night
remember
it
Mr.
was.
Perfect had a little run in WCW. He was there in the. He was in the Millionaires Club. Kurt Hennig
Yes, Kurt Hennig
at the
at some
very beginning.
point. Yeah, I remember seeing him on the Thunder at the beginning, and on the Thunder. This was around the era when Remember Macho Man came?
Yeah,
There was
exactly.
a battle
He
royale,
was
and then
originally in the Millionaires Club.
exactly, they paid him I think $5 million for a 10-minute appearance. No, I'm joking, but this was when he had his hiatus. He had left in
Yeah, he was still getting
'99.
paid.
He's still getting
A
paid a
lot of
lot
these
of
guys were
guap.
still getting paid. Like
Absolutely.
even at New Blood Rising, I'm pretty sure Macho Man was still getting paid, even though he's not on the show.
He made money off all the products they had sold, so for sure
Yeah,
Macho Man was
like
still getting paid, man.
in this
Millions.
in this time, we'll go a little side note here. In this time, remember the action figures coming out for the company would always be like Hogan, Macho Man, Sting, Luger, but like, and then you would watch the TV show, and these guys weren't even on the show most of them.
Exactly. You had the new gen, so you had the Mysterio, you had the Stasiak, you had the Canyon. It was only the last. That was a very good point because that merchandising made them money. It was they still focused on the end, and every time they'd release a figure, they were in their NWO attire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we were in 2000, and you were still selling toys with
Like the
NWO Wolfpack on it.
1997 clothing on.
Exactly, and they were still milking that. But hey, man, it sold. I used to buy them back in 2000. I would just pretend, hey, NW's back, so it made it more interesting playing. But you are right. You make a good point. The last line that they released, actually, Canyon came out on it. Double J came out on it. You had Vampiro.
Yeah,
These
see,
were the
that was what
TNT.
they started finally showing the more modern guys,
Exactly,
the new gen.
exactly. And then
That
you
toy
saw
line
less
was
of.
great.
Amazing. I loved it was Toy Biz who
Toy
had
Biz,
the
exactly.
contract at that time. They had the licensing rights and they made by the way, guys, Toy Biz is who made Marvel Legends and all those gorgeous figures. So Toy Biz was always solid when it came
Yeah,
to the figures.
indeed. And speaking of figures, ladies and gentlemen, IndieQuebec.com is holding a contest for the month of January. It's called the X-Pac Make Some Noise Contest. All you got to do is follow Indie Quebec page on Facebook, and you will automatically be entered to win a elite X-Pac figure with the NWO clothing line. It's the Takeover Fan Takeover Mattel series. More details on Right now. You just go on the site and you can see all the details.
Check it
Please
out,
like the
guys.
Facebook page to win that Xbox figure. We'll send it right to your house, ladies and gentlemen, completely free, completely courtesy of IndieQuebec.com.
Xbox.
Yeah, it's a beautiful figure. We
Absolutely.
didn't
It's the
have
one that
these
comes with
figures.
the articulation at that time, they were very limited. Today, the modern figures are just gorgeous. The articulation, you have interswappable faces, I think mask, heads, hands, you have the
Yeah, this one
closed
comes with the
fist,
cane mask.
the cane mask,
It comes with swappable, like hands you can swap out.
or you
I
could
hope
smack,
someone
punch.
wins this figure who has never had any of the new figures,
Amazing.
just so they can see how cool the new figures really are and how cool they
Compared.
can see the details really are.
Absolutely. Check it out, guys.
Yeah. So on carrying on with this fatal four-way tag match, Vampiro and Muda show up and attack Chronic at the end, but it doesn't cost Chronic the match. Disco refuses to count 3 for Chronic. Then Chavo comes out and he steals Disco's ref shirt and counts the pin for Chronic. This made no sense. Chavo's
This
part of the Misfits in Action, which has a team in the match, but he comes out and helps Chronic win because what? The Misfits are just idiots? Chronic
I think
wins, but the ending made absolutely no sense and there was way too much interference. What did you think of the ending here?
I had no idea what was going on, and this was classic WCW botched, as we say in good French, n'importe quoi
Yeah,
type of
definitely.
ending. It was just so random. Came out, I think it was a drop kick. Took the ref shirt, pinned it. That's just I'm baffled because I don't know why he came out just out of nowhere. It was okay match, but the ending again,
Yeah, the ending really just kills
classic
it.
WCW 2000, even 99 started having weird random endings. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Just seeing that at the end, I was like, I don't know what to say actually.
Yeah. So the next match after, Shane Douglas comes out and gives a scathing promo as usual. He's with Tori Wilson, and it's going to be a strap match, him versus Kidman, where they both have sex tapes with Tori Wilson. I'm not sure exactly what they're planning on doing with them, but there's some stipulation. I think Kidman is threatening to show his sex tape that he has with Tori. But anyways, it ends up being a strap match, which, as you can see, there's already way too much stipulation matches on this show. And I mean, everyone loves a good stipulation match, but this was starting to become a problem of WCW at this time too.
Yes, also the stipulations mixed with the really super controversial like sex tape versus
Yeah,
sex tape type thing. It was again the Liberty, and don't forget Russo came in. He wanted to do what he did with the WWE, the WWF at the time. The the adult storylines, very inappropriate and hush hush, and this was their version. To be honest, I love Shane. I hated Shane Douglas at the time, but watching this recently. I think he was a pretty good heel. He
yeah,
had the blonde hair, so definitely a
definitely
classic
heel. Yeah,
heel. Billy Kidman, if you remember, just came off from being a heel himself. Hogan, remember him and Hogan
yeah,
feuded. It was literally the new gen figure. He was the kind of Kidman was the face of the New Blood
yeah.
at some point.
At some
All right,
point, they
all
never
right.
went
Be
100% into that, but when he was
exactly.
feuding with Hogan, he definitely was.
That's where he started becoming the face. I honestly JJ, that's another thing. I'd never thought it was new to me. When he came in, I knew they were gonna start pushing him, so automatically I didn't see him as JJ anymore from WWE playing some guitar and being a singer. So I wouldn't count that. I would say more Kidman because of the Hogan feud was basically the face of the New Blood. So
At the
I
very
think
beginning, yeah.
exactly, and great talent. Love Billy Kidman. Great cruiserweight. Also Shane Douglas. I like their feud. honestly, because it
Yeah.
was. But the match itself was okay.
It was one of the better
Um,
feuds at the time,
for
definitely.
sure. To compare to everything else on at the time, I would absolutely agree that that was a good feud.
The
So
one
you had
thing, yeah, sorry, yeah.
no, go ahead.
The one thing that I would say hurts this match though with Kidman is that because he's tied to a strap, he does literally no high flying throughout the whole match because you can't like do a flip while you're tied to the guy.
Exactly, and that's what he was known for. That's where he shined most, was high
Yeah.
flying
So Kidman
and
doesn't really shine. This match, they're just basically strapping each other the whole time with the strap,
good old strapping.
more or less.
And in the last, like, let's say 99, 2000, how many strap match were there? I think there's quite a lot. There was one with, if you remember, Dustin Rhodes and good old classic Terry Funk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was
I
one with
think
Ric Flair
Ric
and
Flair
Hogan.
Hogan, a Taipei
Yappa
strap match.
pie.
Oh, no,
Yeah, it was
Yappa
a yappa
Pie.
pie.
The
Brother,
Yappa Pie strap match. We definitely will do an
brother,
episode
I
of the
want to
Yappa
win
Pie.
the title, not Booker T, brother. But definitely,
So
yeah,
yeah, it was. They were never that great, but they were done a lot in this era for sure. In WCW, the
for
strap
sure.
matches, and they were doing so many stipulations in those days. There was probably a bunch of them that we can't remember on Nitro and Thunder too.
But
So
they'd always have the knack of showing up on pay-per-views as well.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess they thought it would sell. It's an old school stipulation. So Kidman ends up winning. He ends up whipping Tori's ass with the strap a couple times. Then the franchise, Douglas, he jumps Kidman after the match, even though Kidman won. And basically, Douglas is end up standing tall. And then Big Vito comes in to save Kidman. And this
out
is
of
where it gets
nowhere.
really random. And then Reno comes out and attacks Vito. It's just,
Reno.
we don't need all like the last match had these random run ins. This one, even more random run ins. Like the level of randomness is higher.
Absolutely.
That I
Um,
found that was just unnecessary at the end.
super. It could have just ended with him choking Kidman, and then obviously Kidman, I think, became a face that night.
Basically,
Like he became a face. So if they would have just kept it where he choked him and everyone felt bad for Billy, and then but then they had Vito come in, which don't get me wrong, Vito was a great hardcore wrestler. He was doing his name with was marking his name in the hardcore scene at the time in 2000. But it was just super random. Then you had the roll of dice Reno come out, and it was just like that at the end. It was sorry to say it was a shit show every time because you'd always have interferences, super random out of nowhere. So yeah, that was just
yeah, it
really
just gets
weird.
confusing when you're adding all these random characters. Like you're trying to watch a
Exactly.
match and then like the ending has nothing to do with like what happened in the match.
Exactly. And then you had Vito petting, I don't know if you realized, Kidman's face at some
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
and he's loving him. I thought it was
That
cute, but
actually once during a live wrestling match when I was working with the CTW promotion,
right.
I got hit off the apron and a ref was doing that to me like on the ground for about 2 minutes, rubbing my face and head. Like, I guess because he saw the refs doing it on TV, or
Thought
like
it was right.
wrestlers would always do that on TV. So he was doing it to me, and it felt so awkward.
Refs. The
I don't
guy's hurt.
remember which ref that was, but that was one of the most awkward moments of my time in wrestling. Good old
Sorry to have brought up
CTW.
some old wounds there, John Abel. Mr.
Yeah.
Prez.
So we'll move on to the next match, which is another insane stipulation. Rip off the camouflage. Major Guns taking on Stacy Keebler, aka Miss Hancock. So basically, they can pin each other. Like how they explain the rules and how the match actually happens are two different things. They say that the match has to end in a mud pit, which is beside the entrance, but they're going for pins during the match. So obviously they could have pinned through during the match. But they say that they had to like strip each other down to a bikini and then go fight in the mud and then the match could end. It's a very 2000s.
Super
Texas
2000s, yeah. It
angle.
was the equivalency of having cheerleaders on. WWF was doing it at that time. You remember they had the Cat, Sable, so they were trying to compete with them, with showing
Yeah, the
them big.
WWE at the time, their
Uh,
pay-per-views would always have brawn panty.
exactly, Jerry King Lawler foaming at his mouth.
Yeah, and Mark Madden does a very good job
Jerry
of doing
Lawler,
that in this match
yes,
too, though.
absolutely, he does, and you always had you had to had a JR in that announcing when it came to those matches, but it was super 2000s, and WWF was doing it. They had not bad, like they had a little roster for women, so Major Guns was one of them.
Yeah,
You
they
had
tried
also
beefing it up.
Stacy
They
Keibler.
definitely were going more for looks than skill. But these two
Exactly.
women were gorgeous. That is
Exactly,
undeniable.
for sure. This was with Nitro Girls, if I remember, 98. I think it was the end of 98, or no, we'll start it before that.
Nitro Girls, it wasn't at the
Yeah,
beginning of Nitro, maybe like 97.
that's it. So it started then, but yeah, they started going deep in matches. And that was one of them, the classic in the mud, rub on each other.
I mean,
You know,
honestly, I've seen way worse women's matches from that era, despite how bad
yeah,
it was.
yeah. This wasn't that bad. I would say it was
For
okay.
the time, it would probably
For the
be
time.
considered not bad.
For sure, it was a rare exception. I'd see. Hancock was. You could see she was still starting to train as a wrestler. Major
Yeah,
Guns as
you could
well.
tell she was
Oh
like
my God,
hardly
she
trained.
was. I give them respect though, definitely to have done it.
Definitely. So I'll let you explain the ending of this match, though.
Okay, so
This is
Major
very Vince
Gun,
Russo.
super Vince Russo again. So Major Gun ends up getting the lead, ends up winning, but Stacy's hurt. She keeps rubbing her stomach, and then out of nowhere, David Flair comes out. And then you can tell that the announcers were confused, but they knew what was going on, but it was supposed to be so you can tell that this was a storyline, right? They're like, oh, but what's so Stacy gets injured, she's holding her stomach, which we right away inferred, hey, why is she holding her stomach? Why is David out there? As you know, they were together at that time.
Yeah,
So
David
right away,
Flair.
David Flair, um, David Flair, that's another episode just on its
Yeah,
own. So you
David
could
Flair's in this pay-per-view.
absolutely a lot of 2000 pay-per-views, by the way, and enough of 99 to be
Oh
honest. David,
yeah,
that's where he started, right?
yeah. He
Um,
shined in '99.
he shined in 99. So we were inferred that she was pregnant, I think, and that was the
Yeah, and
start
that
of
she
the
had a
era.
miscarriage or
She had a
something. But like,
miscarriage.
how dumb is she to have like wrestled while she's pregnant
For a
in the first place? That makes
fight.
no sense.
Makes no. This is classic WCW writing, classic Russo. Again, it was controversial a bit. Like it must have pissed off a lot of women at
It's
that time
controversial,
because
but it's
super.
stupid.
It
Like,
is dumb as hell, to be honest. But yeah, so it was just. You can tell that it was forced on, and oh,
and
I'm hurt, and
we could tell how fake it is. And then
super fake.
they like after they send her off in an ambulance and like they cut to the announcers and Shivani is trying to act all serious and be like, that wasn't part of the match, guys. Like, come
You-
on.
Absolutely, you could tell it's fake by just looking at him saying that, and they were, shocked and they didn't. So it was classic.
At
They were
this
trying to
point,
keep,
Tony Schiavone had kind of like he had less credibility than he did earlier in
for
his
sure.
career.
They were trying to not break role. They were keeping the kayfabe going on right there for the storyline. So
Yeah,
this is
they were
classic
trying.
kayfabe, and So again, the end was kind of sad because it inferred that there was gonna
That she
be
had the
the
miscarriage or something.
baby,
It's like horrible, but
and David Flair, that lucky bastard, absolutely was with Stacy. They had the storyline act, and then Buff Bagwell was he the other Ric Flair, the daddy, again another episode for
oh
sure.
yeah, we'll definitely get into
Plenty of episodes
that
when it
whole
comes to
saga.
99 and 2000. We're gonna cover them for sure in detail. But yeah, it was just one of those Russo classic written all over it.
Definitely. So
Next
then
match, I think.
they go backstage, and Vampiro tells the demon he has to prove himself of being worthy of being part of the Dark Carnival by beating Sting. So Ladies and gentlemen, as you can tell by my co-host's name, the Stinger, this man really is legit a big fan of Sting. He's the biggest Sting fan that I know. So, Stinger, take it away.
Okay.
Unfortunately, episode one, we're starting with perhaps one of Sting's worst ever pay-per-view opponents.
At that time when I watched it, I couldn't see that. I was oblivious to that. Watching it now, I said, guys, what did you guys do to Steve Borden, my guy? So cuts to Vampiro insists that Sting's 9 lives had run out, and tonight the demon would beat him. Sting was old school, descended from the rafters like he used to back in 1997. And to be honest, I was shocked when I saw it back in the day because I thought, Demon was going to maybe beat Sting. They were going to push him. The Dark Carnival is going to get the best out of Sting. Absolutely not. Dale Torborg, aka the Demon, ended up jobbing to Sting because he got defeated, after 2 punches and a Scorpion Death Drop and a splash, I think?
Yeah, exactly. It was like a Goldberg match, but
It was a
replace Goldberg
Goldberg
by
versus
Sting.
Glacier match. I don't know if you guys remember Goldberg versus Glacier. Not William Regal, Steven Regal. That's another episode.
Yeah.
um,
Glacier was a good company, man. He made
it
Goldberg look
was for sure. But Demon ended up
just getting
jobbing
destroyed here.
exactly. Also, what was weird here is Vamp Muta came out and they
Mm-hmm.
attacked Sting. Again, random out of nowhere, Chronic comes out
Yeah, Chronic
and
saves Sting.
saves Sting. They start
So Sting
battering.
doesn't look that strong. Like he
Mm,
won this match convincingly, but then he has to get saved. So you're trying to
by
make the guy look
Chronic.
strong, but then he's like the weak one who has to get saved. It's not a good look.
Again, not a good look. After he pulverizes the demon. And then it was odd when I saw it. Sting just casually walks off.
Yeah,
And the
exactly. It's
demon,
like I'm done for tonight, guys.
yeah, he's like, I'm gonna go shoot a movie. I'm going back to Venice Beach, guys. My contract states I don't have to be here any longer than this.
That's it.
And you see him walk off, and then you just look at you see Demon standing there scratching his head, like what to do. He
Yeah, the
looked confused.
demon. Yeah, then like as Vampiro and Muda are fighting Chronic, the demon doesn't. The demon's like not even joining in with them. It was like a very confusing overall segment.
And then
But
Chronic
yeah, Chronic.
challenges the Dark Carnival to a match later on the show. They even offered to put their titles on the line.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're gonna see Chronic wrestle twice tonight, Muda wrestle twice, and we'll see Vampiro, who's a Canadian from Montreal, right here, wrestle for the first time. Like
Represent.
normally, I'm not that much of a fan of seeing the same wrestlers wrestle twice, only because when they come out the second time, the fans aren't as excited to see them. Like it's inevitable. And I
Pop
mean,
decreases,
I've
absolutely.
seen this situation play out millions of times. Like one of the reasons WWE doesn't do tournaments anymore, I guarantee you, is because it doesn't matter who it is. When you've seen the guy wrestle, by the third time he comes out for the third match, the fans don't give the same reaction at all as like the first match.
Absolutely agree, man. It's like when you're having a surprise party. That first surprise is actually the best one, the best pop, right?
Yeah,
Surprise! But there was no surprise that wrestling 3 times you wouldn't get the same
no,
pop for
exactly.
sure.
Exactly. So then we go next up to a great match. This is maybe my favorite match of the show. It's Mike Awesome, who at this point was fresh off ECW. He hadn't started using his 70s guy gimmick or fat chick thriller gimmick yet. He's just heel Mike Awesome taking on heel Lance Storm. But Lance Storm is face in this match because it's in Canada.
Canada,
So
absolutely.
Lance Storm also, like at this point, Lance Storm hadn't created Team Canada yet. He still had all his belts, and he was representing Canada. He was calling himself World Canada Wrestling instead of World Championship Wrestling. And he had 3 belts, right? He was, and he had just left ECW like 4 months before this too. So no matter how bad WCW was doing at the time, ECW was about to die too. Remember, Stinger? A
I
lot of
do,
guys were like
yes.
jumping ship from ECW because that brand was
Absolutely,
also about to
absolutely,
die.
exactly. And Mike Awesome did jump to WCW during that era, and it was shocking. I literally was watching that live on TV, and when he just came out of nowhere and powerbombed Nash, who was in crutches, if you remember.
Yeah, that was a
So that
huge
was
angle.
huge. It was huge. This was just freshly after Mike Awesome defeated Tanaka for the ECW
Yeah,
World Heavyweight Championship.
that was a
Through the
great feud.
I do, if I remember which pay-per-view was it. It was a certain pay-per-view. It was a bit before, a couple of months before. No, it was a good 6-7 months before. So he was just freshly coming. And I'll be honest, guys. Mike Awesome was amazing. He was a great heel, and it was just sad
Like
how
outside,
WCW
like
took a crap on his career near the end.
oh, definitely, yeah.
But
They
this
slated him in
match,
such stupid angles, but at this point,
absolutely.
he still had his ECW vibe, you could say.
He did, especially versus Landstorm. This, to be honest, was one of the best matches on the card.
Indeed, indeed.
Landstorm just got the big pop. He came out full Goldberg
Yeah, with the
walkout
security following
with the
him.
security, the crazy theme, the 3 belts. He was in great shape. Vancouver was just going crazy at that time, for sure. So, to be honest, this was a great match. They're amazing technical fighters, both of them, great wrestlers. Mike Awesome can move like a cruiserweight.
Oh yeah, man. For
Absolutely, and he
his
was
size, this
massive.
guy was so athletic.
Yeah, and rest in peace to him. Honestly, Mike Awesome was one of my top favorites from ECW. And even when he came to WCW, to me, he was legit.
It seemed like when they brought him in and he attacked Nash that time that he was going to be going more main event, but then they really cooled
Put
him
him in the
off
mid
fast
card.
and he became a
Yeah,
mid carder.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because he came and dominated Kevin Nash, who was booking at the time and had a lot of creative control. He
Yeah.
was a main eventer. But so when I saw him, I said, "Oh man, Mike Awesome is going to run a rampage through the heavyweight championship division."
And we'll
So
have
it was
a new main eventer in WCW.
absolutely,
But that never ended
honestly.
up going that way, unfortunately for him.
Thing is, what I liked about Landstorm as well is he used to always typically do those dry.
His promos before the
His
match.
promos were super dry, and that's what I
Yeah.
liked about him. Very army-esque.
Yeah, definitely.
Very
We got one of
army-esque.
those here
We did. So again, that Vancouver got. They were lucky. They were the last Canadians to see Landstorm,
in
do
WCW.
promo in WCW as well, coming out and then a heel.
And-
He was a heel to the Americans. Don't forget the crowd watching at TV. It was a heel, but to them it was a baby face for
Yeah.
sure in
And
Vancouver.
to us, he was baby.
To us as well, absolutely, because I love Landstorm. I
It
love
was
both
such a
though.
weird dynamic how they would do
It
that.
was because I loved Mike Awesome, but then I was like, no, I have to love Mike, Lance Storm because he's Canadian.
Canada.
So to me, Canada, man, you can't choose against Canada. So I had to go for Lance Storm at the end of this match. But absolutely great match.
They
He
played the
was
Canada national anthem before, and the crowd actually
absolutely
loves it. Like unlike when you would play it
exactly.
in the U.S.
Exactly. They were so bad and racist in the US when you do that. It was just, it's typical. It was kind of like the Sheik in WWE at the time of the Iraqi war. And so it was always like that. It
Racial
was good.
stereotypes.
Exactly. It was good to see that no one booed because it's our national anthem. Also, just Lance was insanely over at that point there. So
probably the most popular guy on the show.
Their era, absolutely. Those terrible Americans, as he would say.
Yeah. He was hilarious on this promo. Was really good.
Super
so he
dry,
brings
but
out
hilarious.
Jacques Rougeau to
Jacques
be the
Rougeau.
special guest referee.
Oui.
Which, like, it works, but at the same time, they already had so many legends under contract, but it wouldn't make sense to use any of them as a Canadian ref. I get that. But they had Jacques Rougeau on their roster in like 97, and they didn't treat him like a legend at all. He was like a freaking mid-carder. He never They never had a chance to make it anywhere like significant in WCW.
Actually, yeah, I agree. They're like, okay, like it's kind of like they kept him outside. They're like, go ref now. So yeah, honestly, like when I saw him, I was like, cool, Jacques Rougeau, like definitely big icon in Quebec, especially.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't like super treat. It wasn't a big treat. It was just, oh, Jacques Rougeau is
It's
being
just like
he's a
weird.
referee. It was just super weird. Because I don't think in WCW he was that like the big name. You know what I
No,
mean? Like
exactly.
probably in a local show, definitely he's a legend. Was
Here,
so absolutely, but
but
yeah,
not in Vancouver.
yeah,
He's a known
BC,
wrestler, but
not in BC. BC, you
no.
might have maybe put an Anglo Canadian, which brings out the next guest, which was none other than Bret the Hitman Hart.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed,
So
Bret Hart. We get to see him at the end. He congratulates Storm.
absolutely.
Rougeau and Storm, they're like they mess around with the rules the whole time. It ends up having to be like a 5 count to win, but then like at the end, randomly, Rougeau says like, "Oh, the first man to his feet wins the belt."
Oh yeah, it's true. Absolutely. So it was a 5 count, and it started with after was a 10 count, and Mike Awesome was defeating him. So I'm sorry, I did jump right away to Brett, but yes, it was entertaining though. It was a classic.
Yeah. How they built it up was great.
It was great. They brought out the
Overall, it
Canadian
was
robot.
one of the better matches on the show. For sure.
I thought so, honestly. Solid this one, and then Hart coming out. We were confused if he was going to attack Lance. He was doing the right thing,
Yeah,
but
he
we doubted
congratulates
it.
him.
Yeah, he congratulates them, hugs Rougeau as well. To be
Always good
honest,
to
great
see
match.
Brett.
It was always good to see him. He must have probably been mad Goldberg was in the building because he is the one that ultimately ended his career.
Yeah,
So it
really.
was sad they took Bret Hart away, too soon, too early, because again, WCW was known not to use people properly, good wrestlers, and Bret Hart is an example.
Oh yeah,
Unfortunately.
indeed. Yeah, but we got to see him here. It's kind of a weird. It's probably one of his last appearances, I would say.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
WCW, at least.
Absolutely. So solid match, to be honest. Stipulation was fun. Was a 5 count and a 10 count. So it was just trying to make Awesome's life a living nightmare. And you could see if Awesome was getting frustrated. He's like, again. So I could see that he was a big face. If you were an American watching the show, you're like, what? Come on, what's going on? He won twice. So I like the angle of that match right there.
Yeah, it worked for
Totally.
sure.
Great wrestlers as well. So technical Awesome and technical Lance.
Yeah. And then so next we get that match. It was an unannounced match. The Dark Carnival versus Chronic for the tag titles.
God.
Like we said, Chronic was really popular at the time. Like, if fans wouldn't believe how popular Chronic was on this show. They were like probably like top 3 biggest reactions of the night from the crowd.
Absolutely.
It's not that great of a match though. Muta missed the ref at one point, and the end, once again, which is what makes me mostly say that it's not that great of a match. The Harris brothers, who I am not a fan of, they show up and cross Chronic the title. So the Dark Carnival are the new tag champs. But yeah, I'm not a fan of all these random run-ins at the end of these matches. But
it was
WCW.
That was WCW in 2000, man. I thought I don't know if they ran out of ideas or they wanted kind of like a filler, like let's fill this card.
All these characters on the show.
So
we didn't need to see the Harris brothers here at all.
Ron and Don Harris. I think we saw them enough before, and absolutely shouldn't have never been in the NWO 2000. By the way, on a side note, but
we'll get into that.
Another episode for sure. But just super random, and I think I don't know if it was up like if you saw that, but they were trying to depend on Chronic the night, like to get the crowd going, like they were depending on them. Like I love Chronic, by the way.
They send them back out again because they got a great reaction. So it's like they were really depending on Chronic to be like some of the bigger stars on the show, definitely.
But Vancouver, the crowd, they dug them absolutely. Like they loved, so it worked. But I mean, they took a gamble there, but I think it was another tag team. Like you must have had a real known tag team for you to get a pop. So they were lucky. It was Chronic. They were still good, but imagine they would have sent out like the
Road
Perfect
Warriors or
or
something.
Road. No, it would have never worked. Chronic, they pulled it off. I think truly for the third time, BC was down with the Chronic.
Yeah, definitely. I believe BC is still down with the Chronic, and I know Quebec is quite down
Like
with the Chronic too.
amazing Chronic down there.
Yeah,
Naked
yeah, indeed,
Uh,
indeed.
good referral, by the way.
Yeah,
So this was, I think, Dark Carnival. I know it was cool at the time with the face paint. I think they were trying to do the Undertaker Kane-ish type approach,
yeah. They
especially
wanted to go with dark characters, go
dark
a bit horror.
characters. But Dale Torborg was absolutely horrendous.
Oh yeah,
For
the
me,
Dark Carnival. There were so many
uh,
storylines that happened with these guys.
I don't know if you agree, but ever since that match with Vampiro,
Where he throws
and
Sting off the top of the
yeah,
screen.
yeah, I was sad by the way at that time, man. I was really
You're
mad,
like, are they
and
trying to kill Sting or what?
I really hated it. I loved Sting, and I still love Sting, and I didn't appreciate that, and I still don't
Trying to kill your
appreciate that.
favorite wrestler.
They wanted to kill him because my name is Stinger, and I'll sting you. But
That's right.
it's just weird match again. Demon was pretty useless, I find, to be
Yeah.
honest. When he first came out, I understood they signed a deal with Kiss, which they wasted so much money. By the way, people,
Yeah, to have the rights to have a Kiss character in
like,
WCW, they
yeah,
paid
man. Gene Simmons
$1
charges
million
quite a
or
lot.
something.
Yeah, man, it was a lot, and I don't know why they thought wrestling fans would dig that, like a Kiss fans would, which probably had what,
Yeah.
like 5% Kiss fans in that crowd.
I remember you though being a very big Kiss fan in high school though.
I was indeed. For me
It was
at that
cool.
time, I loved it. I was like, what? And I just saw not too long ago before that Detroit Rock City,
What a
which is
classic movie from
what
the era.
amazing
Man,
movie from
go see that
1990.
movie.
Absolutely, guys. If you just guys want to laugh and watch a good movie, do watch Detroit
Detroit
Rock
Rock
City.
City.
So it was shortly after that. So 2000 was so random like that. Like I loved WCW, and then Kiss. I loved, and they weren't even related. And then you had a gimmick in WCW.
It's
So it
like
was
your two
super
favorite
random like
things
that.
mixing
Yeah,
together.
just merging
It's
together.
almost
So I was
too
like,
perfect.
whoa. It was too perfect. I was like, when I saw Demon come out and the God of Thunder play, I just stood up and I was like, whoa. And then I was like, wait, he has face paint. Is he gonna fight with Sting? Are they gonna feud?
Yeah.
So it was promising, but I was
It didn't live
now
up to the expectations.
absolutely not. At that time, it did, but now looking back at it, it's still classic to me. But
Yeah.
I did like Vampiro versus Sting, like the new gen sicko versus the old school sicko.
Some of it worked, but then there were
it did.
some episodes that were just so crazy.
Because again, Vampiro would job to Sting. The real big push was when Great American Bash 2000, if I'm correct. It was a Great American Bash where he threw them off, right?
Off the screen. We'll
Off the
definitely
screen,
we'll get there one day.
100%. But yeah, for sure, 2000s. You got to understand, guys. At that time, it was different from now. Now, we're seasoned fans. We've seen a lot of years. We've seen new eras after that. But put a note that we actually, before this podcast, we were discussing on how we felt at that time and how we feel now.
Yeah, it's totally different.
A lot of it is nostalgia, so we can't let that cloud. But nostalgia actually dominates this event for us because it was pertaining to 2000, where Eminem was popular in the movies, and we were in high school, and we didn't have the internet to check out what was going on, and we had three brands, ECW, WCW, so that played a big part. But
it was a different time.
super different.
It was a great time to be a wrestling fan.
Absolutely, 100%. So they were always trying to find ways to be fresh. They failed. Yeah, they failed at some point, but give them props honestly for trying. So
yeah, exactly. So next up, we have our semi-main event: Kevin Nash versus Goldberg versus Scott Steiner. It starts out Steiner and Nash, they come out and they start wrestling because they play Goldberg's music and he doesn't initially come out. And the announcers are saying they hadn't seen him all day. I legit thought at the beginning that he wasn't going to show up, but he does show up, and it ends up being a three-way brawl. It's a big brawl. It's power moves, brawling, pretty much it. It's
Yeah, this is truly
three
where the big
three of
boys
the
played.
slowest guys on the roster.
Exactly. The slowest guys always got paid the most.
Yeah, they were the most jacked.
They were the most jacked, and it was actually always mentioned, like the big guys. It was actually mentioned when Conan was announcing towards, I don't know if you remember, he said Chronic, oh, they're too big and slow.
Yeah.
So it was always mentioned that those big guys, the main eventers, the ones that had the huge contracts, were being kind of like the Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage. They were all big and slow, no cruiserweight, no high flying, yet they get paid, the most. So this was a classic example of Nash, Goldberg, and one of my favorites of all time, Big Papa Pump.
Oh yeah, he was awesome. And
L-
but yeah, this was definitely WCW main event style, like slow, kind of older guys, but power moves, and like there would always be a convoluted ending, and this one ends really badly. So um, during the match, when Goldberg, at one point Goldberg just leaves because he refuses to take Nash's power bomb. And then on the commentary, they're basically talking about how wrestling is scripted, which like is a complete no-no. But they did this in Russo's era of wrestling. They would reveal this. They would reveal too much
Huge
about
mistake.
about how the business is run.
Huge
And
mistake.
then
This
at one point, Russo himself comes out and starts yelling at Goldberg. We didn't need to see like
No,
I don't
absolutely
mind
not.
Russo. I'm not as much of a Russo hater as much people, but I don't need to see Russo on the show.
Exactly. He got too comfortable. You're absolutely right. This is a big no-no. These things in wrestling should like you can't have it. This was totally breaking kayfabe. This was just as bad as the MSG incident.
Yeah,
Actually,
where
yeah, like
where the
no, that
wrestlers
was pretty.
hug.
Yeah, that was pretty big. That was the first, but like they Russo got too comfortable. He did that
This
way
was
too
like
many
a
times.
planned version of that. Like they
Yeah,
actually
like
wanted to
dude,
do this
like
on
they're like,
pay-per-view.
yeah, we're gonna pull it off. People know that we're breaking kayfabe. We're gonna make a, no, it shouldn't have, honestly.
Exactly. No, it's a horrible idea. But
Uh,
so then
match itself,
yeah, yeah.
the Prez, the match itself as well was. Honestly, I was surprised because that was the match I was looking forward
It
to.
was like the most
Honestly,
built up match. Besides,
exactly.
like it was even more built up than the main event itself. Pretty much, it had more star power. It had the most star power on the show. Because think, you didn't have Flair on the show, Luger,
Nope, nope,
Hogan, Scott Hall. Like there was a
exactly.
bunch of guys WCW had under contract that they chose not to book on this show for various reasons. Some of the guys were just like happy to stay home and make millions. I guess I can't blame them, but at the same time, the product they were putting out wasn't as good as it could have been compared to the roster they had under contract for sure. But they would continue to pay these guys because they were scared of them jumping to WWF.
Yeah, because that was a trend at that time, jumping.
Yeah.
So you'd have
Jumping for more
WCW
money.
jumping there, exactly, WWE jumping there, and they'd use that against each other.
Yeah.
So
The wrestlers had
um,
more power in those days because there was more than one show in town. Now, finally, with AEW, that's kind of the case again. But for the past 20 years, WWE had all the bargaining power over the wrestlers.
yeah, I
In these
totally
days,
agree,
the
man.
wrestlers could kind of do what they wanted,
Totally
in a
agree.
sense. Yeah.
Totally agree
So
on that.
Midajah comes off as a horrible manager. She hits the ref, but totally misses. I've seen her miss big important moments like this on pay-per-view before. Scott Steiner's manager, Medeja, like, she was horrible, man. I am not a fan of her at all. She was only there for her looks, but that was a 2000s trend. The women had to be hot, and they weren't necessarily trained wrestlers.
Yeah,
So,
they would just put pretty faces at that time. They would just throw them in. Exactly.
The pretty faces was all what it was about. And keep in mind that in those days, it was not like today. Unfortunately, women were very much looked at as sex objects in the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Today you have amazing champions and great athletes, respected as well. Not that the other wrestlers in the 2000s were respected. It was just the way they were perceived.
I mean,
like
in
I said,
2000s,
today, yeah,
like the most talked about and popular women in pop culture at the time was Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears.
exactly, and
They
were
were
trying
purely selling
to
sex,
they were trying to put more Carmen Electra out there. She was big in
Yeah.
2000 and strong, so they were always putting Carmen Electra-ish type women in wrestling. For obviously, I'm stating the obvious here: big-breasted and appealing to the eye, as a lot of people would say. So yeah, it was definitely no backstory.
That
They
was
didn't
the
have. They
trend.
were just exactly. You were just a trophy out there. So it was a trend today. Whereas you have amazing champions, complete athletes. So it changed a lot. Wrestling definitely has gone a long way from 2000 to 2021. Like I
Oh,
said,
yeah,
amazing
definitely.
champs. I can half a dozen to a dozen women wrestling, and so a lot of them were champions at the
The
moment.
one
So
thing that's evolved the most since then is definitely like the women's wrestling has stepped it up. Like if you watch a show from then to now, that's definitely the biggest change. How much more women there are on the shows and how much better they are.
exactly, huge difference actually. So lackluster. I'll let you continue. Lackluster match. What you had Bill come out.
But he refused
Band-Aid.
to take the power
Yeah,
bomb
the
from
power
Nash.
bomb. So that was, again breaking the kayfabe. Like he's just like, I'm not jobbing to him. I'm leaving. I'm too good. So this was what he
And
was
that
inferring.
was like the plan. The whole plan was to make it look like he wasn't following the plan. It's too convoluted. I really don't like storylines like that.
That's it, because that kills a bit of the magic that makes wrestling, man. So that was a no-go for me.
Yeah. So we're at the main event time. At the time, I hated Jeff Jarrett. I'm kind of a fan of his now. I like his Memphis work, and I like some of his work, but at this time, I hated him. He's taking on the man who carried, in my opinion, WCW through the end, Booker T. And finally, I mean, we're not like watching these chronologically, but I could tell you that this was the first pay-per-view to have a clean ending where a guy just wins with no interference in the main event in maybe a year and a half in WCW.
Amazing match, by the way, because both were amazing talents. I hated Slapnuts and Double J, to be honest, but he was a hell of a good heel. I at the time in 2000, I was like, why are they pushing him so much? Because of his dad, Jarrett, etc. But now looking, I am a huge fan of JJ. You told me, guys, check it out. He had a podcast, The Prez. Ended up showing it to me. It was amazing. It's actually long. I think it's about 2 hours long.
Oh yeah,
if
Jeff
I recall.
Jarrett, he has a podcast. It's called My World on YouTube. You can check that out. And he is a very likable guy, and he explains a lot of stuff. This guy has a lot of knowledge about wrestling, and he has great stories to tell, all the way from Memphis to TNA, WCW.
JJ, definitely. But the match itself, Booker T, amazing. When Booker T won the championship, I was happy because I remember Booker T back from, I think, 96. I used to see him on posters. And Zellers, guys, remember Zellers?
Oh, Zellers.
I used to walk there. Yeah, good old Zellers.
Classic I used to Canadian Zellers.
Good old classic Zellers. And they had the poster section, and I saw Harlem Heat all the time on merchandise. So to see Booker T, and by the way, I watched a lot of WCW in '98 as well. So seeing Booker T, half of the Harlem Heat,
Finally
And he was
rise up
great.
the ranks.
Yeah, he was kind of like a martial artist, no, with his crazy kicks and
Yeah,
his
he had
axe kicks,
what a unique in-ring
scissor
style
kicks. Absolutely, man. He had the charisma, he had the intensity.
His promos were
Hulk
really
Hogan,
good at the time.
we're coming for you, Hulk Hogan.
That
Booker
could
T,
have ruined his
bro.
career, but it ended up being a classic moment.
Bro, Hogan loved him. He gave him props for that, by the way. He said,
Indeed.
you did brilliant. But Booker T winning the belt, feuding with JJ, that match itself was the best match, to be honest, on the card.
Yep,
They're both
definitely. And that's how it
talented.
should be.
That's
Your
how
main
it should
event
be.
should be your best match.
Clean finish, like you said, because WCW was known at that time to butcher
Always a stupid
matches.
ending at the end.
Stupid ending with an interference. This one was clean. It was just great. Both talented. So I had nothing to say about the main event.
Michael
Basically,
Buffer was there to announce it,
Michael Buffer,
as he always was for the main event of WCW.
Bruce
They paid a
Buffer,
guy like
who,
$1 million a show just to come main event.
just like his brother Bruce with the
Yeah.
MMA at the moment. Yeah, I mean Michael Buffer, classic. Are you ready to rumble? That's another movie we're gonna talk about one day.
Oh, definitely. We'll do a Ready to Rumble episode for sure.
King
We
Dewey,
have
man,
to.
Dewey. He's everywhere, Dewey, man. I'm telling you. But
This
but yeah, honestly,
match
solid.
makes the show, like, I can't consider this among the worst WCW shows ever, just because the main event is good, and that's definitely not the case for all WCW shows.
Absolutely. So at least we finished with that. That was great. Ending was great as well. Totally.
This feud was like a main feud for WCW in this time. These guys wrestled many times, but what's good about that is that they knew each other a lot. So it made a great match. Like Booker T gives Jarrett his move, the bookend through a table. Booker wins, so you get your babyface champion standing tall at the end of the pay-per-view. Great way to go off the air. That's just that's like wrestling 101 right there.
Yeah, for sure. Also, the rock bottom. We'll talk about the rock and the bookend. I
Yeah.
liked Booker T's version of the bookend, honestly.
Yeah, he hit it good. Booker T, he had his own way of doing it.
When he did it, I was like, okay, so he's the equivalent of The Rock. Like that's how I'm supposed to see him. That's
Yeah,
the caliber of main
of The Rock.
eventing.
They definitely were trying to like position Booker T as a rockish character. He kind of dressed like The Rock.
For sure. He had the suave, absolutely silk, the mic. He was,
he
you know what?
His own catchphrases like The Rock, but they're not as well remembered. He saved the
No,
drama for your mama.
For your mama. Don't hate the player, hate the game. But I don't know. I think he did a great job. Even if he didn't take the Rock's approach, sorry, definitely had his own charm and his charisma. So
he
I was
wasn't
happy.
a Rock ripoff. No one was saying that.
Absolutely, exactly. But they were very similar, and you put them in the same bag, pretty much. So
they ended up feuding in WWF, which was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool, man. It was definitely cool when you saw that. Was a huge historical moment. Honestly, never thought that you'd see that, but that again is going to be another episode for sure. We have many episodes coming, most probably. But again, yeah, ends up with a good classic wrestling match. On 10, Prez, I would say at the time and now, if I mix up both averages and grades, I would give this pay-per-view a 5 on 10.
5 on 10. That's a pretty fair grade. You know what? I'll agree with you on that one. 5 on 10.
5 on 10 because
I've seen worse. Some really bad moments, but there was some good moments too.
Exactly. So it's WCW 2. I would say, honestly, some people would say 2 on 10. I saw some. I was looking at a review at some point, maybe a year ago. It said 1.8 on 10.
Show so harshly.
Yeah, like 1.8 on 10. Like it's not so bad, guys. You know, WCW was in trouble at the time. We all know. We know WWF had all the big storylines going down, but you still had to give it to WCW. They were trying to deliver what we wanted to see, an appropriate, adult themed, cruiserweight, big names being thrown out, but they just did not have, the right roster, we'll just say, right? Because man, if you put guys like Chronic in WWF, like let's say they would have just went there directly and never, debuted, you never know them in APA, what would have happened. The Vampiro with Kane, let's say, even Sting jumping, things like that, like made a lot
At
of,
the time, that's what we
at the
were
time.
all waiting to see. We wanted to see these
Exactly. So,
big matchups.
I know WCW is trying to compare itself to WWE. So I would say honestly, 5 on 10, to be fair. You had the great main event, aside from the randomness. I mean, I think, yeah, solid 5 on 10.
Yeah, the main event saves it. Definitely the semi main event takes away from the show, but the main event leaves you with a good feeling to keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, New Blood
So
Rising, Vancouver.
that'll be it for our first episode here of the Turner Podcasting System. You got any words for the fans before we head out here, Stinger?
Well, tonight I'm going to watch and pop good old Fall Brawl 2000. I'm interested in watching and reliving that moment. Also, I was listening to Eminem. That was super 2000s today. So today's theme was 2000, and we're
2000s.
going to keep
We're
it
in
at
that 2000s
2000s.
vibe.
Exactly, 2000s vibe. So, wrestling fans, ladies and gents, truly appreciate you guys tuning in. Definitely will be back sometime next week. And we do wish you guys to have a great evening. Stinger is out. P.S. Just want to say I love that catchphrase. Vancouver is down with Chronic. That caught my. Yesterday I laughed when they said that because I think Chronic was very underrated. To be honest, last note on they shine.
You leave it, Chronic like sticks in your mind after seeing this show.
It does. Their theme, their finisher, just their costume, the approach. It was kind of like Matrix-ish, no? Like Chronic.
Yeah, definitely, and which was a very 2000s look.
Yeah, so exactly. Big shout out to Chronic. Now I understand, I think, why they tried to bring him out many times, and they pulled it off. So that was another reason I like the pay-per-views, because we saw Chronic. So I'll leave you guys on that for sure. 2000s, something I'm definitely looking forward to review. Classic era, so many funny things. Guys, I do wish you a great evening, and the Stinger is out.
That's right, fans. So I also will be watching Fall Brawl 2000 soon. Maybe you too. You can catch it on the WWE Network, and we'll be reviewing that soon. So watch it before, and you can follow along with us, or you can watch it while we review the show, perhaps. Any questions, fans, you have, send an email to indiequebec@gmail.com. Go to indiequebec.com for all your latest wrestling news, for indie wrestling news, and for every wrestling news, and about past wrestling news, such as this podcast you've just listened to right here. I'm the Prez, and thank you for listening.